And let's first go over some webinar protocols for this 2025 Section 319H Nonpoint Source Program request for application. So please make sure your microphone is muted. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded. If you have any computer issues or audio issues, we recommend dialing in via phone, and the phone information should have been in your GoToWebinar registration email. Please communicate through the questions box, and it would be nice if you fill out your name and organization so we know who's here. And you can submit questions at any time during this webinar, and we'll stop periodically for questions, and then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. And then we will post the recording of this webinar and the slides with notes to our DEQ Nonpoint Source website, hopefully within a week. If you have any technical issues, we do have a phone number listed at the bottom of this slide with my colleague, Caitlin, who can help you with any problems. So again, welcome to this webinar for the Nonpoint Source request for applications for the FY25 funding. My name is Melissa Secor. I am the Nonpoint Source Project Coordinator out of Central Office in Richmond. I'm managing this year's RFA process on behalf of the Office of Watershed and Local Government Assistance Programs. Also with me is Stephanie Krebs. She's the team lead of the Grants and Implementation Nonpoint Source Program. So she's supporting this meeting by monitoring the questions, and she'll be involved in the Q&A session. And she'll provide any other helpful input along the way. So today's webinar is scheduled from 9:30 to noon, and it's set up in two parts. The first part will be an overview of the RFA, and the second is a training on how to complete the application materials. And the goal of both presentations is to equip applicants with general but comprehensive information to help you submit a successful application for this funding. So if you'd like to follow along, there are several documents in the handout tab of this webinar, and I'll also show you how to access them on our website. So let's get this started with a poll. I'd like to find out who's here today. So tell us where you're from. Are you a nonprofit? Are you from a municipality, a planning district, a regional commission? Are you a soil water conservation district? Are you from DEQ or other? Almost 90% voted. Give it here another few seconds. Go ahead and I'll close it. And let's see. Most folks are from municipalities. We have some nonprofits, quite a few people from DEQ. So thank you for joining this call. So just to provide an overview of what we're going to talk about today, I'll first start out with an overview of the RFA, which is basically the who, what, where of this process. I'll go over types of projects and the required elements of them. I'll go over examples of education and outreach and water quality monitoring activities that are eligible. I'll go over what projects can't be, so ineligible activities, or those that aren't eligible as standalone activities. I'll detail budgeting and things to keep in mind that pertains to the budget, for example, ratios of technical assistance to BMPs. Then I'll actually open up the application materials and show you what needs to be submitted. And I'll show you some resources, where to get help along the way and where to turn if you have questions. So I'll go over some changes since issuing the RFA in June, and then we'll have our question and answer session. So before I dive in, I guess, Stephanie, are there any initial questions that we've received?
There's none so far.
Okay, excellent. So let's do another poll. So I want to find out if you have ever managed 319 funding here. So let us know if you currently manage a project. Yes, but it's been a couple years. No, but you've been a partner. No, you're totally new, or no, you are a colleague at DEQ. Okay, we're at over 2/3 of the vote. I'll give it here another minute. Well, seconds rather. Okay, voting's kind of stalled, so I'll go ahead and close it. And share the results. So most people are totally new. So that's great. We do have some that have been partners or they currently manage, but we're excited to see so many folks that are new to the program. So hopefully this webinar will help you along the way. So we're going to start here with an overview of the RFA. And more details can be found in our RFA informational document in Table 1, which are in the handouts of this webinar, but also on our website, and I'll show you where to go for that. So let's first start with what is 319H funding. So 319H funding gets its name from Section 319H of the Clean Water Act. This section of the Clean Water Act established the non-point source management program to reduce and mitigate the effects of non-point source pollution to waters in the state. So when I say non-point source, this means pollution that's caused by runoff or snow melt moving over or through the ground. As the runoff moves, it picks up and carries away natural and human-made pollutants such as sediment, bacteria, nutrients, and finally it deposits them into lakes and rivers, wetlands, coastal waters, and groundwaters. So when DEQ monitors streams across Virginia, we assess the data to see if the samples exceed water quality standards. And if they do, we work with local partners to develop a study to figure out how to fix it. And that's called a total maximum daily load, TMDL. Once we do that, we will work with local partners to develop a cleanup plan to outline all activities that will address the non-point sources of pollution, and those are called implementation plans. This year, each year, EPA awards 319H funds to states, territories, and tribes to implement those plans, the implementation plans. And we need organizations like you to help us get things done on the ground to implement these plans. Then we monitor again and assess the data to see if there are changes in water quality. The cycle continues until we've reached the water quality standard. So in short, this funding is to help Virginia meet its water quality standards. So who can apply for funding? That'd be local governments, including counties, cities, towns, county health departments, soil water conservation districts, Virginia institutes of higher educations like universities and colleges, planning district commissions, regional commissions, tribes of Virginia, nonprofit organizations, and other agencies or departments of the Commonwealth. So, but remember, if you currently have a 319H funded project that you want to continue, or you want to have a new one, or you have a new one that started on or after October 1st of this year, then don't apply to this RFA. You should follow up with your non-point source regional coordinator for details on how to continue your current project. But even if you are one of those grantees with an existing project, but you want to start a new project in a new IP area, then you can apply to this RFA. So what can you apply for? To know what types of activities can be funded in your area of interest, first you'll need to find the approved implementation plan, or IP, that encompasses the area. You can find a list of the approved plans in Table 1 of the RFA, and then you can obtain a copy by visiting the DEQ website, or you can email my colleague Ashley Wen. I'll provide her information later. BMPs fall into one of 4 sectors. So that's agriculture, residential septic, pet waste, and urban. And we'll go over each of these in more detail in a few slides. So keep in mind that any activities done with this funding must be written in an approved IP. So for example, if your area of interest has a plan that addresses sedimentation, you won't be able to implement a residential septic program there because these septic practices are for bacteria impairment, and that wouldn't be in the plan. You can implement one or more of these sectors in the same project. So for example, you can propose having ag and residential septic BMPs, or you can have septic and pet waste, or you can have a project that's just agriculture or just septic. You can really mix and match it, but it really depends on what's in your IP. And you have to ensure it's feasible or realistic within your means. So also funding must be used for on-the-ground implementation, with the exception of the bulk of the project. We'll be implementing the actual best management practices, or BMP. And why is that? That's because BMPs installed are the surest way to improve water quality, and that's the ultimate goal of this funding. So other activities that can be covered are education and outreach that's outlined in the IP, as well as water quality monitoring that is consistent with the monitoring plan in the IP, and we'll go over those in more detail in a few slides. So where can you work? Any activities done with this funding must be located within an approved plan's geographic area where the practices will improve the specific impaired river or stream segments. So each plan or IP will describe the geographic area of the watershed, but another way to look at this is using the mapping resources provided by DEQ, including the eligibility map and table from this RFA. And DEQ has an environmental data mapper online, and I will show you those momentarily. And I'll also show you a few examples of the environmental data mapper, EDM. So like I said, for the mapping tools, we have the eligibility map from the RFA, our EDM website, and we have a Virginia EJ Screen Plus mapping tool. And I'm going to stop the presentation and switch to showing you these tools. So let me refresh this real quick. So this is our EDM website, and a link to the site will be in the PowerPoint. And this is what it looks like when you first load. You just press I agree. And on the right side, it'll automatically show the layers list. And you want to go into, let's zoom in here a little bit. You want to go into DEQ data layers and then go down to TMDL watershed layers. And that's where you can find the implementation watersheds. Let's click on that. And these are the areas that have IPs across the Commonwealth. So you'll see different shading here. Green indicates IPs that are eligible for 319H funding, which is really key for this RFA. The yellow indicates in progress IPs, and you'll notice another shading up here, up in Northern Virginia, the orange border actually indicates that is ineligible. But that's because that's an area with an old IP, but there is interest in the area, so we're considering updating in the future. But really, the focus should be on the green areas. One quick thing about the yellow that I do want to bring up, the EDM map shows all in-progress IPs, where our RFA map only shows 2 in-progress IPs. Those 2 are currently under EPA review. And to be eligible, EPA review is needed by December 1st, 2024 to qualify for the RFA. But based on the current status of EPA review, we're now recommending that you defer to next year if you want to use those areas. So again, the take-home message is really focused on the green areas, but if you have any questions about eligibility, contact the regional coordinators. So I want to, while I have this open, go over some examples. So I'm going to go into Southwest Virginia to show you an IP area. Click down here. Sometimes when you first click, the pop-up box will default to the county, but if you click on this triangle in the upper right, it'll show you the other layers that it pulls. So the second one pulls the implementation information that we are looking for. So this is the IP information. It shows you the watershed name, the plan name. It shows us it's eligible for 319H funding, when it was approved, the pollutants that are covered, and then it has a link here to the actual IP. So I'll click on that, and it should load. So this is another way to get access to the IP, which is really important for completing your RFA. So I'll go back to the map. And another way you can use this website is there's a search function up here on the upper left. So I'm going to search for that same IP. And I'll pull up different addresses, but we know we're looking here for implementation watershed. So I'll click South Fork Holston River, and it'll take us right there. Same pop-up box, same links. So that's pretty handy. So you can use EDM also to look at fiscal stress data. And fiscal stress, it'll help determine if you are eligible for increased cost share rates based on your fiscal stress rating. And fiscal stress data is based on median household income from the census annually. So let me show you how to pull that layer up. It's still in the TMDL IP watersheds group, but it's down here, county fiscal stress. And it should overlay here in a second. So again, I'll pick on South Fork Holston. Pulls up different layers, 1 out of 3. Here is the IP information. If I click over here, it's giving me the county boundary, and I click again, it'll show me Smith County is above average fiscal stress. So this is an aspect of the RFA that needs to be addressed, and this is a really great tool to help figure out if your area applies or is within a fiscal stress area. So another consideration beyond fiscal stress that we're covering in the RFA is environmental justice communities in your area. And we have a different mapping tool, which is the EJ Screen website, which is also linked in the RFA webinar PowerPoint that we will post. So this will load. And again, you say okay to accessing this data. Similar to EDM, where we have these DEQ data layers. So you need to expand it. And again, scroll down to TMDL IP, implementation watersheds, and it'll pull exactly the same thing that we were seeing in EDM. Now, up here on the upper right, this layer list has the Virginia EJ communities. It has a layer for low-income communities and then communities of color. So let's first start with low-income communities. We'll add that layer. And so you can zoom area with the green where there's a approved implementation plan and see if there are low-income communities. And you can actually click on the data and it'll give you more information. And then it'll give you, you can click here for an EJ report. So that can be handy when addressing the EJ related questions in the RFA. And then let's look at the other layer really quick, communities of color. And I'm gonna display this. and you can click on the area to pull the data. It'll show a report, but then it'll also show you the percentage population of color. So I do recommend not overlaying them together because it can get a little complicated, but you can toggle between the different layers pretty easily. So again, these tools are really just to help you identify if those areas are in your IP of interest, and then you can speak to those in the RFA. And there's a lot of information available. If you need any support navigating them, then again, please contact us. So I'm going to switch back here to the PowerPoint. So this slide provides just an overview of our RFA this year. The award for each applicant can range between $75,000 to $300,000, and DEQ has a total of $1.5 million for this application across the state. Now, one caveat is the funding levels are subject to change, but this is what we're working with now. The projects you should propose on are up to 3 years to use the funding. Important to know that the 319H program is a reimbursement program. So the subrecipient will need to fund the costs and then request reimbursements on a quarterly basis. There are match requirements. Non-soil water conservation districts have a 30% match requirement, and we'll discuss more of that on the budgeting slide. This also provides a timeline for this RFA process. There could be minor shifts, but we're going to work hard to stick to this. So your questions about the RFA are due by August 9th, and then the actual submission of your application is August 30th. And then we will review it in the fall and make a selection by early 2025. And then a NOIA is published again early in 2025 to notify our official decision. And then the project start date will be in October 1st, 2025. So you might be wondering the reason why there's such a long gap between February and October. Well, DEQ actually has to apply to EPA for these funds. So based on who we select, then we apply to EPA to get it. So we don't receive those funds until fall 2025. And then we can dish it out to you guys and start the project. So sometimes the funds come out sooner, and we try hard for that, but there's no guarantee. So bottom line, don't apply for projects that start sooner than October 1st, 2025. So the bottom of the slide provides a link to the DEQ website where it really has all of our documents, and I want to show that here real quick. So let me get out of this slideshow. So let me start here is our main Nonpoint source management website, and if you scroll down, funding, grant, and project resources is key for our information about this RFA. So you go down to current funding opportunities and expand it. And this is where all of our RFA materials are, our instructions file, our RFA table, eligibility map, the application form, and the application questions document. Both of those are spreadsheets that I'll show later. We have a frequently asked questions document. And then below here will be the webinar. Hopefully by next week, this will be updated with a link to this webinar recording and then our PowerPoint presentation. So definitely come back here for more information. Also, I wanted to show you this Nonpoint source project management materials section has a ton of key documentation. I'm going to say this several times about how we had recently the Nonpoint source best management practice guidelines and specifications. We updated those and they are effective July 1st of this year. And this is where you can access those new documents. And then if you scroll down, lots of our Nonpoint source forms and template documents are all here on this portion of the website. But again, if you have any trouble accessing this, do not hesitate to contact us. Let me switch back to our PowerPoint. So let's get into more details about the various sectors I mentioned earlier with some key points to keep in mind. So don't forget to review the approved implementation plan or IP that encompasses the area you're interested in to determine what types of activities can be funded. So we'll start with agricultural BMPs. If your plan includes agricultural practices, they may include things like stream exclusions, riparian or forested buffers. And these funds, this funding uses a cost share method model, like the Virginia Agricultural Cost Share, or VACS, where the cost of the BMP implemented is shared with the agricultural owner. So for projects implementing ag practices, these bullets list some key things to keep in mind. You need to partner with a soil water conservation district, assuming that the lead applicant isn't already a soil and water conservation district. Now, these districts are the state's foremost experts in agricultural best management practice implementation through their administration of DCR's VACS program. So soil water conservation districts are the access point of DCR's tracking system, which is required for reporting or tracking of ag BMPs. So that's another reason they're a necessary partner. So cost share for implementing ag BMPs must use the specifications for those BMPs that are in the VACS manual, which is linked here, or our non-point source DEQ's BMP specifications document, also linked here. So you need to know how you will identify and recruit landowners to participate in this cost share program, and you should consider contingency plans if outreach strategies don't go as anticipated, and sometimes that does happen. So plan for how you'll coordinate or leverage funding for producers to maximize their participation. Especially important, this is especially important where VACS funding is available, but also consider other funding like Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. So, and more details about these topics are of course in our RFA instructions file. But going to the next slide, another item is all landowners receiving the cost share funding need to sign a BMP contract, and that's available via DCR's tracking system and also in the non-point source BMP guidelines. So multiple bids are required for this work. It's a competitive process, and grantees must ensure applicants follow and document the bid procedures outlined in the VACS manual. Approval for ag project designs must come from someone that has a DCR issued engineering job approval authority, EJAA. Whether it's someone that's on the grantee staff, a partner's staff, or through joint funding with VACS or NRCS, you can get these approvals and they'll ensure proper EJAA, or you can have a professional engineer handle it. And all of this is covered in our non-point source BMP guidelines. The non-point source program has requirements for conservation plans and biosecurity considerations for all ag BMPs in the non-point source implementation areas. And more about those special considerations are in the VACS manual. And finally, grantees must be able and willing to issue a 1099-G tax form for cost share when it's administered over $600. So like ag BMPs, residential septic BMPs use a cost share model where the cost of the septic BMP implemented is shared with the homeowner. So examples of septic BMPs include pumping out septic tanks, fixing or replacing failing septic systems, connecting to sewer lines, and installing alternative systems. For projects implementing septic practices, these bullets are important items to keep in mind. Partner with a local or county health department. They issue permits for septic work and have staff who are experts at addressing septic issues. And they can also be a source for referring you for referrals to the cost share program. So to track BMP implementation, you can do it in one of two ways. One would be partnering with a soil water conservation district to access the DCR tracking system, and that's assuming you're not already a district. Or two, you can use DEQ's BMP warehouse, which is linked here. Any partner can access the BMP warehouse as long as you create an account. And to upload BMPs to the warehouse, you'll use a template provided within DEQ's website. So cost share for implementing septic BMPs must use the specifications and guidelines for those BMPs that are in DEQ's non-point source BMP specs files and our guidelines linked here. So have a process and know how you'll identify and recruit homeowners to implement these BMPs, and consider contingency plans if those outreach strategies don't pan out as you had anticipated. You'll really need a lot of homeowners to participate, especially compared to ag or urban BMPs, to be successful with residential septic BMPs. So really consider that in your outreach planning. So you must use a BMP contract from DEQ for these septic BMPs, as it includes conditions required for this funding. Also, like ag, multiple bids are required for the work, so grantees must ensure applicants follow and document the bid procedures outlined in our BMP guidelines. You'll need to develop a residential septic guidelines for cost share within the first 30 days of the award, and then it's updated annually. And that includes a landowner's eligibility for the program, how they should apply, and the associated administrative procedures. The guidelines for what should be included are in our non-point source BMP guidelines, and there's actually a template available in that same document. Grantees must be able and willing to issue a 1099-M tax form for over $600 of cost share payments to landowners. Also, know who the licensed septic service providers are in your area. There are parts of the state that have very limited licensed contractors to do some of the septic BMPs offered in this cost share, and that can be a major roadblock to implementation. So here's a link that can take you to VDH's website that has a map of septic haulers, installers, operators, and so on within the state. So pet waste, now we'll discuss pet waste BMPs, which include practices such as residential sized composters, pet waste stations, and confined canine facilities. So for projects implementing pet waste practices, here are a few things to keep in mind. The cost share for implementing pet waste BMPs use DEQ specifications for the practices, which is linked here. And there's no standard issue contract like there is for ag or septic, but DEQ can advise on what should be included in a landowner or operations and maintenance agreements. So pet waste BMPs are only reported and tracked through DEQ's BMP warehouse, which does require a login and upload using the template linked here, and then we can help you along the way with that. Now, lastly, there are urban BMPs that can be done, which address stormwater and other actions that aren't required by permitting, such as NIPDs and VIPDs. So some examples are rain gardens, stream bank stabilization, and permeable pavement. You'll really need technical expertise for the design and design approval. Also, you'll need to include local government for permitting sometimes. A government agency issuing a permit may not necessarily be a partner on the projects, but it does make sense to investigate the permitting process and build that into your timeline for the project. So know how you'll identify and recruit partners and homeowners to implement the BMPs. And again, similar to the other sectors, consider contingency plans if your outreach strategies don't pan out as anticipated. So cost share for implementing urban BMPs must use specifications in one of the 4 documents listed here in these sub-bullets. So the first one is Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, or VCAP, BMP manual. There's DEQ's Stormwater Handbook, DEQ and Virginia Tech Stormwater BMP Clearinghouse, and we have the Virginia Stream Restoration and Stabilization BMP Guide, all linked in this PowerPoint. So there's no standard issue contract for urban BMPs like there are for ag and septic, but DEQ can advise you on how to handle a landowner and operation and maintenance agreements. You will need to provide a copy of the final design and its approval for the project file. And again, 319H cannot be used to meet any NIPDs or VIPDs permitting requirements. These urban practices should be really going above and beyond requirements of any such permits. So urban BMPs are also reported and tracked through DEQ's BMP warehouse, which requires the login and uploading a template. So that covers the 4 BMP sectors. And another type of activity that you can do and have covered by 319H funding is education and outreach. And this is allowed as a supplement to the BMP implementation, which means it can be a means to recruit interest for BMP installation and support activities identified in the IP. The purchasing and use of outreach materials or equipment, items, and supplies must really directly support eligible project outreach and education activities, and it has to have a connection to the goals and milestones of the implementation plan. So general environmental outreach like anti-littering campaigns or educating K through 12 audiences is usually not part of an IP. Those don't have a clear connection to the goals and milestones of an IP. Outreach and education geared towards signing up landowners to participate in the cost share program or curbing pet waste are directly connected to the BMP implementation and are really obvious choices for spending the 319H resources. So other activities that aren't geared towards increasing signups may be eligible though. For example, getting folks familiar with the TMDL that spurred the IP and what voluntary actions they can make to support it. Also inviting community members to tour a demonstration site of an implemented BMP. Producing tools and resources such as brochures, videos, and pamphlets to target folks to participate in implementing BMPs on their property. Networking between groups, like realtors or health department staff is another way to spread awareness and benefits of BMP implementation. And our RFA instructions file has details about some other activities that are eligible. So I wanted to stop real quick and see, Stephanie, do we have any questions at this point?
We don't have any questions so far, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, just put that in the question box.
Okay, great. We'll go to the next slide, which is the last type of activity that can be covered by 319H funding is water quality monitoring, but it must be included in the IP, especially if the IP includes details for monitoring such as parameters, the sites, and the sample collection per year. So the data will need to be uploaded to EPA's database either directly, or you can use EPA's water quality exchange database, which is linked here, or you can use the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, which then links to EPA's database. So be sure to include the time and training of your staff within your grant period. Now, an important caveat of this part of the funding is a quality assurance project plan or a QAP is necessary. Be sure to include time to develop one. QAPs require EPA headquarters review and approval, so applicants should be aware of the time necessary to accommodate the extensive review and revision cycles that are involved to prepare and finalize one. But DEQ will support you along the way with this. So water quality monitoring activities should be consistent with the monitoring plan described in the IP. It is not intended to be used for research or BMP efficiency. So that begs the question of what can it be used for? And two examples are that it can be used for documenting progress in achieving water quality milestones in the IP. Also, this monitoring can help identify areas in the IP where pollutants of concern concentrations or loadings are highest, which could assist in outreach and targeting of BMP implementation. So for example, maybe you're focused on 2 to 3 HUCs, the hydrologic unit codes for an IP area, and you could choose another HUC in which to do the water quality monitoring for future project development. So now we'll go over what are ineligible activities, and here are some highlights. Any implementation outside of an IP area cannot be funded. So it's really important to get to know your IP area. And that's why I showed you earlier, we recommend using that EDM website to find the locations. Also, we have table 1 of the RFA. As you're getting to know the IP area, be sure you're staying within the scope of the activities or BMPs that are included in that IP. If you're required to do something to satisfy an enforcement action, such as a NIPDES, VIPDES permit, MS4, then this is not the right funding source for your project. So residential septic programs that only include maintenance or pump outs cannot be funded. The repair or replacement of failing systems or straight pipes or connections to public sewers must be included to be eligible for funding. Projects with BMP implementation aimed solely on addressing Virginia's Watershed Implementation Plan, or WIP 3, to meet Chesapeake Bay TMDL requirements are not eligible. And as previously mentioned, water quality monitoring, specifically for research at BMP efficiency, is not eligible. Public sanitary sewer system improvements, including sewer line extensions, are not eligible. But note, connections from an individual house to the property line in order to connect to a sewer line are eligible. Purchase of promotional items are ineligible unless those promotional items are specifically listed in the IP or was specifically detailed in the grantee's application, and DEQ gets prior authorization from EPA. So to clarify promotional materials, you can do newspaper, radio, TV, or social media ads for the cost share program. Same goes for direct mailing. Door hangers, flyers, handouts are also okay. Make sure you check the IP to see what type of promotional materials are included. What you can't do, though, is PR or advertising to promote your organization. You can't do gifts or souvenirs or displays at annual meetings or conventions, or just any other goodies that are handed out at a booth or public event are included. Food or refreshments are allowed, but they need pre-approval with justification that's well documented, and it needs to adhere to DEQ and EPA's guidelines. So again, all of this is detailed in our RFA instructions file, and you can contact us for any questions. So let's move on to budgeting. So as mentioned earlier, this funding is a reimbursement program, so applicants should be aware that you will perform the work, you'll pay for the project costs, and then you'll submit a report to DEQ for reimbursement on a quarterly basis. Now, effective July 1st of this year, there are new residential septic cost caps and cost share rates. So if your application includes septic, please use the FY25 BMP guidelines and specification files that have those new rates, and I'll go into more detail about that in the next slide. So there are some match requirements to be aware of. So for non-soil water conservation districts, there's a minimum of 30% match requirement, and that can be from federal or non-federal sources. For example, a match could be provided by NIFWIF, DCR, VCAP, local nonprofits, and also homeowners for the portion of the cost share. Activities that are deemed ineligible for 319H funding are not eligible to be used as match. Now for soil and water conservation districts, there is no match requirement, but they must provide cost share for BMPs. So as a result, they don't need to include technical assistance match in their budget, but the BMP portion of the budget should reflect the cost share from homeowner or property owners or other programs like mentioned earlier, like VCAP or VAX. And those all help to fully pay for the BMP. And we'll discuss this more during part 2 of the presentation. An important note, there are match exceptions. So projects that include the development and implementation of a residential septic program in a high or above average fiscal stress area may reduce their match requirement to 15%. And again, that's why earlier I showed you the EDM site so you can see the fiscal stress layers and see if they are applicable in your IP area. Another important budgeting item is the 35% baseline for technical assistance, and that's your limit. That's your limit for these applications. But you can get up to 50% if you apply with some exceptions. And some exceptions include if you're administering subgrants with multiple partners, if you're conducting water quality monitoring, or if you're a new applicant or grantee. And we'll go into more detail about that in part 2 of this webinar. So another quick mention about budget details. You need to show calculations in the cells of the spreadsheet, and I'll show that in part 2. And those calculations need to use the data provided. So if you have a staff person that is working for 100 hours at $25 per hour, the calculation needs to correctly result in the $2,500 total. So, and I'll show you later, there are comments and note cells, and we highly encourage you to use those to help explain things. So continuing about the budget topic, and I want to go into more detail about the septic cost share rates and caps that I mentioned in the previous slide. So again, effective July 1st, we have updated our septic cost share caps and rates. So again, if you're including septic in your application, use the FY25 BMP guidelines and specifications files. So this slide provides the new septic BMP costs. We increased the average total practice cost due to feedback we received from existing subrecipients or partners. And we also considered recent actual costs to complete the BMPs. So this slide, there's a lot of numbers going on in these tables, so let's try and break it down. There's several considerations to determine the possible costs of a septic BMP. First is if the area is classified as fiscal stress or not. And then the next depends on the property owner income verification. So for fiscal stress, earlier I showed you the data layer in the EDM website to easily see if your area classifies as fiscal stress or not. And recall that fiscal stress data is based on the annual county level data for median household income. And the results of that determination will tell you which costing structure to use here. So table 1 on the left is for areas not classified as fiscal stress, and table 2 on the right is for areas classified as fiscal stress. So next, you'll consider the property owner's income. The Nonpoint Source program offers a minimum of 50% cost share to all participants, no matter their income level. And we can increase assistance up to 90% cost share for certain incomes. So applicants and then subrecipients are responsible for establishing a process to verify income and determine the appropriate cost share percentage rates to use. But it should be based upon median household income on the homeowner or property owner level. So let's go over an example here. Let's say you're in a fiscal stress area. So you'd use table 2 on the right. And then next you'd complete the income verification of the property owner and say they are at 50% of the county median household income. That would mean you'd use the 85% cost share rate. So hopefully you can see my mouse here. The median income you find is 50%. And so you are in this 85% cost share rate column. So as an example, if you are going to do a RB1 septic pump out, that means 319H funds can cover $385 of that. And the average total practice cost is usually about $450. Now, another example, say you are doing a septic tank system repair, RB3, and you are in this 85%. 319H can cover $6,375 of that practice. So you use the same method for table 1 on the left if you are in a no fiscal stress area. So again, if you complete the income verification and it shows the property owner's median income is 50% of the county levels, then you will use the 75% cost share rate column here on the left side. And that provides, again, for the RB1, that means for a septic pump out, you could get $340 from 319 to cover those costs. And then you go down to RB3 for this individual, could get up to $5,625 for a septic tank system repair. So down at the bottom of this slide, it has links to our Nonpoint Source BMP guidelines and specifications files, which provides a lot more detail on this topic. Now moving on to application materials, or the package that you'll be submitting for this RFA. It includes the following items. The application form is attachment 1, and that's an Excel form that has 6 tabs. You submit as the Excel document. Do not PDF it, send it as the Excel, and I'll show more about that in part 2 of this webinar. Attachment 2 of the RFA is the application questions, and again, this is another Excel document, and this has 5 tabs with questions, and this is the narrative portion, and you submit as an Excel document. The questions in attachment 2 align with the criteria on which the application will be evaluated, and the questions are set up so that it really walks you through the information needed so that you can give straightforward answers. And depending on the types of activities you'll propose to do, many questions end up being skipped or they're non-applicable. And many questions are 1 word, yes, no responses, or can just be 1 sentence. And we'll get into that into part 2 of this webinar. Now, as far as documentation, be sure to follow the required requirements for the file formats and types when submitting the documents. Table A in the RFA information sheet has details about that. Make sure you have signatures where needed. Some other information here listed in this slide if you're providing match, have letters of support, and that should be packaged together as 1 PDF file. Include your project area map. There's no requirement for the format, but please make sure it's legible and fits into one standard size 8.5 by 11-inch page. Don't forget your W-9 needs to be signed. Make sure you're using the Virginia Commonwealth form, which is linked in the RFA and posted on our website. There are optional documents you can include, such as letters of support from non-match providing partners. You can describe your previous accomplishments. And also you can provide a copy of your federally approved indirect rate agreement if you're including that in your budget. So for your submission, we only accept it via email, and it needs to be sent to our NPS grants email address listed here. We prefer it to have the subject line listed on this slide, and it is due August 30th. So this slide provides resources to help you with your application, and the one-stop shop is our DEQ funding grant and project resources website, which I showed you all earlier, that has our RFA materials, our manuals, our templates. It has a wealth of information. Also use table 1 of the RFA to help find eligible IP areas. And remember, those implementation plans are your primary document for putting together a project. And again, all activities that you propose need to be included in the IP and within the boundaries of the IP. And to obtain a copy of the IP of interest, you can go to our website. I also showed you in EDM how you can get linked to it when you find your area of interest. And also, this is the slide with my colleague, Ashley Wendt. She's the lead for IPs, and she can connect you to any if you're having trouble finding them. And I already mentioned, to see the actual boundaries, you can use our EDM website that's linked here, or eligibility map that's provided on the RFA. And as always, you can contact our regional non-point source coordinators for any information about past activities in the area or water quality monitoring, or really anything along the way. And in a few slides here, I'll give you some contact information for our various regional coordinators. So I did want to mention some changes to the RFA since we published. We released it in early June. And since then, we did make some edits to the documents. We updated some links because the FY25 DEQ non-point source BMP guidelines and specifications files came out July 1st. So we updated the links to the new documents. Also, we added some clarification about our new match requirements for soil water conservation districts. So we do recommend that you download new versions of the RFA instructions and those attachment files 1 and 2 in the FAQs document. So this is a slide with our listing of our non-point source team. We are fully staffed, which is awesome. And the map on the right shows you the different regions across the state, and then the applicable regional coordinators information is on the left. I did want to mention our Valley area is actually split between 2 of my colleagues. So Madison is the lead for the eastern side, basically east of 81, and then Kim handles the western side. But if you have any questions, you contact the wrong person, they'll still be able to help you out and lead you in the right direction. So now we'll stop for questions, and remember, we will post the recording and the presentation to our DEQ website, and also the Virginia Business Opportunities EVA website, which are all linked here. So Stephanie, do we have any questions yet?
We just have one. It's asking, if you're a soil and water conservation district that wants to apply for this funding, does septic have to be included, or can you choose to only get funding to install ag BMPs? So yeah, the answer for that is no. You do not have to you don't have to have septic included in your application if it's included in the implementation plan. You can only do ag if you want. Like Melissa mentioned earlier, it's kind of a mix. So you look at your implementation plan, see the types of BMPs that you can install there, and then you choose what you think is most feasible and realistic for you guys to implement. So it could only be ag, or you could do ag and septic and ag and pet waste, or any combination. Again, as long as whatever is in the implementation plan, whatever is listed there is what you'd be eligible to apply for. Hopefully that answers your question. That's the only question we've gotten so far, though.
Okay. Well, at this point, the plan is to take a little break before starting part 2. So Stephanie, I see it's 10:32 here. Do we want to give it till 10:40?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here, and then we will be back at 10:40. And during this time, if you come up with any questions, put it in the chat box and we'll cover it. We'll be back here soon. Okay, I have 10:40, so we'll get back to the webinar and start part 2. But before I get there, Stephanie, were there any questions received during the break?
No new questions.
Okay, and I want to make sure you can see my screen okay.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, excellent. Well, so this is part 2 of the webinar. In this part, we'll provide detailed guidance for pulling together your application packet, and we'll really focus on the application questions file and the application form, both of which are loaded to the handout section of this webinar, and then, of course, on our website. So, like I said, there's 2 parts of the presentation. First, I'll cover the attachment 1 of the RFA, the application form, which is linked here, and then I will cover the application questions. Just as a disclaimer, I will be calling out specific questions and parts of the application, but my emphasis just means that those sections really have critical information that we need to evaluate in your application. And many of those that I'll highlight are also parts that we've seen neglected in past applications. So please don't neglect to provide complete answers on all your questions so that we as reviewers from DEQ have the information needed to evaluate the application and you don't end up getting a lower score. So before I get into this, let's do another poll. Let me launch this. Do you plan to submit an application for this RFA cycle? Let us know if you definitely plan to do it, maybe, depends, no, not at this time, or you're someone from DEQ. Have about over half of people that have responded. Okay, I'll go ahead and close it because we have a majority here. Then let me share the response. So we have a lot of maybes. That gives me hope. And hopefully this webinar will give you the information needed to make the decision to apply. We do have some that are definitely planning to do it and some not at this time. So thank you for your responses. So first, I want to bring up updates in the forms since last year. We removed conditionally eligible IPs in the RFA because in the past it created confusion due to inconsistent availability of required documents such as closeout reports. The NPS team's RFA evaluation process will naturally be able to assess situations where an application proposes projects in an IP area that previously had projects completed. We also removed continuing funding RFA for existing subrecipients. So instead, our existing subrecipients can work with their regional coordinators to identify additional funding needs, and then they can get it through a modification process instead of going through the whole RFA again. So our RFA reflects the change in match requirements for soil water conservation districts. We previously mentioned how districts don't need to provide match, and this is because DCR already provides statewide match funding to soil water conservation districts. And we'll go into a bit more detail when I'm discussing the budget. Another item is EPA is encouraging watershed targeting. So we adjusted our points for section 3, which is called watershed geographic description and location of the project. So now the points possible for section 3 actually matches the value of section 4, which is the project methods, which that covers outreach. And finally, we clarified some existing requirements to hopefully help people understand about the level of detail for budgets, indirect cost rates, BMP design requirements, and so on. So again, in the handouts section of the webinar, you can access these materials, but I'm going to go ahead and switch out of this PowerPoint and show you the spreadsheets. So make sure, yep, you can see that. I'm gonna zoom in here just a little bit so it's not so tiny. Okay, so I have attachment 1, the application form open, and we'll go into each of the tabs. You can see down at the bottom of the spreadsheet, it has tabs for the application, 6 tabs, and then we have some example tabs highlighted in yellow. So first of all, this README tab provides the step-by-step instructions for approaching the form to better understand it. And there are instructions also on how to complete each tab at the top of each tab, but highlight this one first. The more you understand it, the easier it is and less daunting it is to fill out. So it's key to look for cells with red text. That's the fields you will complete. There are fields in black text and they're locked and they're meant to be static. I mentioned these yellow example tabs, 1 through 5 are highlighted in yellow. They're examples. Now they aren't perfect, and completing your application the same way really doesn't guarantee you'll be selected for the funding, but we provided these just as a resource to help you through the process. Also, please do not use these example tabs to complete your application because they might not be properly formatted. You need to use the main application tabs to provide your information. One important tip is to resist the urge to fill out the information immediately. It's really important to start in tab 1 and work your way through all 6 tabs sequentially. This is because tab 1 should be filled out before tab 2 before tab 3, because what you enter early on may actually populate the later tabs, so you have less information you have to input. So let's go ahead and move to tab 1, application. And this is the basic information requested. So it's your contact information, your organizational ID numbers, the IP name, watershed. And this is important. We'll actually use this form for future reporting if you are selected. Now, one thing I want to point new this year is this top portion actually has different entries for the different types of points of contact, a project point of contact, contract, and reimbursement. And the bottom here of this form has the definition of each point of contact, but the project POC is the main contact for the application and then the resulting projects once it's initiated. The contract POC is responsible for signing the contractual documents. And then the reimbursement POC signs the quarterly reimbursement reports. Now, in some cases, the same person is used for several or all of these roles. So please just enter whoever it is in each cell, even if it's the same person. And remember to fill in the cells that only have red text. For example, the black shaded font down here in cells B20 through N25, those are all not red because that ends up being populated by what you input in tab 4 of the budget. So now let's go to tab 2 for the partners. Really fill in as much as you can. Do at least put the names of your partners because we'll need them in subsequent tabs. Please note that the first portion of the table is for the applicant organization, and then the remaining ones are the various partners. So you will find that there are some cells that have drop-down yes, no's. Let's see, primary role in the project has a drop down. Let's see, yeah, technical lead, supporting partner, or project administrator. So the technical lead is the has expertise on the BMP design or construction. A supporting partner can provide outreach, education, or admin support. And then project administrator is usually the organization tasked with oversight or management of the partners, and that's usually the applicant. Source sector is a drop down with the various activities, like I had mentioned, the 4 different BMP source sectors, and then education and outreach, and so on. And then you have some cells down here to leave if there's match involved. I highly recommend you actually waiting to input the match data down here until after you've completed your budget, because you need that match information, that match value, to align with what is put into tab 4. Now let's go to tab 3, your outputs. So really provide detailed information about the BMPs planned in your proposed project. It's critical to input this data before you do tab 4 budget, because these BMPs populated here actually auto-populate in tab 4, and then it'll be a lot easier to fill out your budget. So this tab has 2 different sections. This first section is the BMP project activity summary, and this focuses on your BMPs. So here's the different source activities, and then you put your BMP name, who's the responsible party, watershed names, and then the rest of this is where you fill in how many you propose. If it's an ag BMP, you're gonna list the exclusion extent in linear feet or acreage. There are drop downs, like I had mentioned, to populate that, hopefully help populate the information, make it easier with the BMP side. And then if you scroll down here is the non-BMP project activities. So that would be your education or outreach or water quality monitoring that you'll list. And then you have target completion dates and so on. Now let's go to tab 4, the budget. So I actually want to go back to my presentation slide and show you the bullets there, and then I will go back and we'll actually look at some of the cells. So for the project budget detail, everyone probably approaches it differently depending on your proposed project, but one recommendation is to start with the BMP construction budget category. And again, once I get back to the spreadsheet, I'll show you exactly where that is. But the reason is because the project is ultimately driven by the BMP implementation, so it's good to start there. And then for if you have septic BMPs, use the updated costing that I had mentioned that's in the FY25 guidelines and specifications files. And then when preparing the budget, remember the standard technical assistance to BMP ratios, and then also consider if you qualify for any exceptions, if you're a new applicant, if you have multiple partners, if you're doing water quality monitoring and so on. That can help you increase your technical assistance percentage to up to 50%. And then include your calculations, and I'll show that once I'm in the spreadsheet again. So let's go to the next budgeting slide here. So I've mentioned match requirements, and don't forget to fill this out if it's applicable to you. If you're a non-soil water conservation district, then you have the match requirement of 30%. But this slide, the intention of this table in this slide is to help you determine if match is required for you. But first, I want to define the terms match versus cost share, which at the bottom of this table has a quick summary of what those terms mean. But match essentially is the non-319H funding that contributes to the project to pay for BMPs or technical assistance, which must total to 30% for non-districts. So for example, match can include work time or fringe, travel or supplies. Those are technical assistance activities. And for BMPs, match can be the cost share or other funding sources from partners that contribute to complete the practice. So I've mentioned before, that can be from VCAP or VACs or homeowners. Whereas the other term I'll say here is cost share, and that's the portion of BMP costs from the various sources that pay for the actual total cost of the BMP. So that can be from our DEQ's 319H funding and along with other sources, so VACs, VCAP, homeowners, and so on. So now here on the right of this slide, there are pie charts to try and help provide examples of different cost share sources that can contribute to paying for the BMP. The top chart on the right shows ag BMPs that involves funding from VACs, NIFWIF, and the property owner in addition to 319H, all of which those different sources covered the total BMP cost. So the bottom right is an example of septic or urban BMPs that involves funding from the locality, a PDC, and the property in addition to 319. So there's many ways to slice and dice what I like to call the BMP pizza from the various cost share sources. And if you have any questions, you just let us know and we can help you through it. So now let's go back to the table on the left to help understand how this match and cost share applies to your application. So if you're a non-soil water conservation district leading the application for this funding, then you must meet the 30% match requirement. So as said earlier, match can be used for BMPs, but they can also be used for the technical assistance portion of the budget. And it can come from the applicant themselves, the partners, or homeowners. The mix or proportion of funds provided by the various entities really depends on negotiations between the applicant and their partners. But if a soil and water conservation district is a partner, then the cost share from the district BMPs actually can serve as match. Now, don't forget to see if you qualify for some of the match exceptions that help reduce the percentage requirement. For example, if you have a project that includes residential septic activities that are in a high or above average fiscal stress area, then you can request to reduce match down to 15% for those septic related activities. Now going to the right side of this table, if you are a soil and water conservation district that is leading the application, you don't have to meet the match requirement, but you must still show the cost share funding in the BMP construction section of the website or of the budget. So as a result, districts don't need to include technical assistance match in the budget, but the BMP portion still has to show that cost share from the homeowner, property owner, or any of the other programs that contribute to paying for the BMP. So I will switch here back to the PowerPoint, or excuse me, this spreadsheet. Give me a second here, and slideshow. And I'm going to actually go to the example tab that is in the RFA to help show this, since it already has data inputted. So this is for a non-soil water conservation district budget. And as I mentioned, start down in section 6, the construction. So I'm going to scroll here. Hopefully don't make you dizzy, but I'll go over. So section 1 of the budget is your personnel. So staff, salaries, or wages. Section 2 is fringe. 3 is travel. 4 is supplies. 5 is contractual. And 6 is construction. And like I said, it's important to start here. And you'll notice once you get to tab 4, the black text will be auto-populated from tab 3. And then you will just need to enter in the costing information there on the right for your BMPs. Another item to consider is that I've already mentioned is the technical assistance to BMP ratio that's in your budget. You can go to tab 1 that has the section down here, starting in row 20, the auto populates based on the budget you inputted. So here, total project funds, it'll pull your percentages. And so this budget has 28% TA funds. So that is meeting the 30% maximum. And so that's good to go for our TA to BMP ratio requirements. So once you have filled in your construction proposal budget, then you can fill in the remaining sections in tab 4. Now, you don't have to complete every single budget category. It really just depends on what you need to build your budget and try and have a successful project. So this really all just depends on how you want to manage your technical assistance categories. So I did mention earlier about including your calculations, and I wanted to show that really quick here when you're inputting the data. So let's start with row 11. Let me zoom in a little bit. So row 11 here, we entered an individual that'll work on the project, and they're proposed to have a $30 per hour rate and work 600 hours over the 3 years. So the DEQ funds and match, since this is a non-district, should account for the data inputted here. So this is pulling the calculation here. You can see on the upper portion of the spreadsheet is pulling from the cell. So the $30 an hour times 600 hours. And then since this has match involved, they're saying DEQ funds are gonna account for 70% of their total cost, and then match will pay for 30. So bottom line, we need to see these calculations rather than just inputting 1200. Please show it. You don't have to do the equals G11. You could just do equals 30 times 600, just do what works best for you. But showing the calculations is really important for the process. So another thing I added to this spreadsheet that I'm displaying is an example of a budget for a soil water conservation district, since they have that difference of match. They don't have to provide match. So here you'll see in these technical assistance budget categories of personnel and fringe that they don't have match accounted for here. It's all paid for DEQ funds. But you scroll down to the construction section, and this is where you put the cost share information and the cost share amounts that are supporting the BMPs. This is where you list where the additional cost share is coming from to contribute to the budget there. So now remember, I'm showing you these yellow tabs. These are examples. Please do not input your actual application into these. Use the main tabs to input all of your application data. So next we'll go over the final 2 tabs, tabs 5 and 6, which are pretty quick, and then I will open it up for questions. So let me get to tab 5, which is for water quality monitoring. If you do elect to do this, please work closely with your regional non-point source coordinator to get any data necessary and fill out as much as possible. And remember, if awarded, you'll have to develop that quality assurance project plan before any monitoring activities can get started. And that involves, again, completing EPA's template. There's a DEQ review and then an EPA review and approval. And sometimes there can be several review cycles. So I recommend allowing at least 3 months at the beginning of the project to complete this process. Now let's go to the last tab here. This is your checklist and certification. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is here to help make sure you filled out everything in the application package and that it's in the correct format for your submittal. And again, only input into the red text fields, and then scroll down, and please don't forget to sign it. It's just a digital signature. So I guess I'll stop here and see, Stephanie, if we have any other questions.
So we have one question. It's from part one, actually. And it's talking about on the EDM mapping website that Melissa showed us earlier with the shows all the green areas for eligibility. It says, what does it mean when the project status says implementation project closed? So I responded to that question. Hopefully everybody saw that. But basically that just means that a past project has been closed. So as long as it's indicating eligible for 319 funding, it should, in that same box, there's one of the lines in the information there will say 319 eligibility. As long as it says it's eligible and it's green on the map, then that's eligible for funding for this RFA. So don't worry about it if it says it is closed. It doesn't mean that that's closed for you to apply. Again, as long as it's green, it says it's eligible, you can apply for that. But other than that, I haven't got any questions on the materials that you presented just now.
Okay, great question. Okay, well, let's move on to attachment 2. And again, our PowerPoint presentation that will load to the website by next week has bullets in it. But I wanted to actually show you the application materials while I'm talking to these. So I have attachment 2 open. Be sure to read the instructions and get a sense of the questions, and also so you don't duplicate your responses. It's recommended to review and read all the questions before responding to them. Each answer should be concise but sufficient. So sometimes your response can be as short as a sentence, or it can be a paragraph, but we encourage you not to be longer than 2 paragraphs. So it's focused on what you need to answer. And you can, in the attachment 2, we have the response section, and that's where you input your responses. Please, some of them have drop downs for yes, no's, and if a question does not apply to your project, then just select no or not applicable. Please do not leave any questions blank, because then we won't know what you mean. Please take note of places that you think you might be providing the same answer, and we really encourage you, if that happens, please discuss that with your Nonpoint Source Regional Coordinator, just to make sure you're understanding the question and providing the right answer that we are looking for. So you will notice that in this attachment 2, there are occurrences of blue text or hyperlinks, and this is, they are linked to the definitions tab to try and help you understand what is meant by the term. So to open those, you actually just click on this cell, and it'll take you, let's click on this one. It'll just automatically take you to this other definitions tab that was output. So it'll define what an output is. So those can be helpful. So let's go through these. I'm going to go through each tab. And again, there's different tabs at the bottom here. This first one is project overview. So refer to the implementation plan to answer these questions and make sure you're proposing to what you're proposing to do is actually eligible in the area, and it should be defined in the plan. So, and these questions really help you pull out that information from the plan. So some things to keep in mind, IP goals are listed in each IP, and they're usually called measurable goals. These are the targets for implementation activities. So examples can include a number of ag BMPs or a number of septic BMPs, outreach campaigns. So make the connection between these activities that you're proposing so they align with your IP goals. Now for question 4 here, each IP has stages or phases of implementation for activities. So be sure to find this information, again, usually in the measurable goals of my milestone section of the IP. Let's scroll down. Now, question 10 indicates if your project addresses environmental justice or tribal communities. Please be sure to respond to this question as applicable. And remember earlier, I showed you that EJ screen mapping tool that can help with this question that shows you low-income areas or communities of color. And that is linked on our website. So really input information to provide a strong rationale for the interests and activities that are proposed. And describe the watershed you propose to do the work in and any targets you'll focus on. Targeting is really important. It helps show progress towards meeting IP goals. There is a section in the implementation plan that will explain areas to target and why it's necessary to focus there first. So we'll be taking that into consideration when we're reviewing your application to see if you've made that connection. So, but maybe there's a reason to target somewhere differently than what the IP says. So if that's the case, make sure you explain that and give us a compelling reason for why you're targeting those different areas. Let's go to the next tab for project methods. This is the largest section of questions. And even though it's the largest, depending on your project, there can be several sections that are not applicable if you're focused on one source sector. So they're grouped into the different source sectors of agricultural, residential, pet waste, and urban. So again, if you are only proposing ag, then you'll respond to this section and then say no for the rest. There's also, if you scroll down here, a section about public outreach and water quality monitoring down here. So it's important to provide a rationale for the type and quantity of BMPs. This often relates back to how you're prioritizing or targeting. And it's really important to be realistic with your time and resources and budget. So describe your outreach related to those specific BMPs. Really, how will you promote this program that will lead to success? Demonstrate you understand the requirements. So that's the cost share administration, contractor selection, design requirements, installation, O&M requirements, and so on. And don't skip any of these subsections. Make sure, contact us if you think something is duplicative or if you don't fully understand. So I just wanted to go here, show you question 21 real quick. If you plan to do outreach that's outside of promoting BMPs, that's what this question 21 speaks to, the general public outreach. And then question 22 is about the water quality monitoring. So please be sure to fully answer that. Now let's go to the budget narrative tab. Scroll to the top. So this is asking for a rationale behind the budget. You input it into tab 4 of attachment 1, the application form. So be sure to be comprehensive and accurate and demonstrate the amounts requested are really reasonable and realistic. So what is the rationale behind the numbers? Explain your numbers in the budget here. So this section is broken down into a section about direct costs. And direct costs are the bulk of the budget. That's your personnel, fringe, travel, supplies, contractual, and your construction BMPs or any other direct costs. And then you scroll down here, and that's for indirect costs. Now, most people don't use this, but if it is applicable to you in your budget, then you need to complete it. So, and about the general budget narrative down here, this is a section that'll help explain any technical assistance allowances or match exceptions, circumstances where you want to request more than 35% technical assistance, or if you're an applicant with any of these circumstances and you want to get additional TA. So question 32 is for if you are administering multiple partners or sub-grantees of 2 or more, you could be eligible for some additional technical assistance. And then question 33 helps describe if you're a new applicant. And again, you can get that TA percentage bumped up. Number 34 is if you're doing water quality monitoring and if you want to request additional TA to help support those activities. And then 35 is if you have said yes to any of those three that I just showed for additional TA, this is what you'll respond to, and then you'll provide justification and make sure it doesn't exceed 50% of the total funds requested. And this is where you can provide your strong justification for why you think you need this. Now, there are match exemptions for fiscal stress, that minimum of 30% match for non-soil water conservation districts. However, if your project is doing septic BMPs and your locality is in a high or above average fiscal stress area, then you can use a higher cost share rate for homeowners to receive more cost share funds. Then as a grantee, you don't have to provide the 30% match on those activities. Rather, you could qualify for 15% match, and you'd have to request that during this application process. And again, you can check your eligibility fiscal stress areas in EDM like I showed earlier. So let me get to my next slide. Now, the bottom of this about the budget is the cost effectiveness. So the question DEQ will ask when we review your application is, are these activities that you selected, are they cost effective? It's really, is it effective or productive of an effort in relation to the costs you listed? There are other reasons why things may cost more, such as material costs have gone up, shortage of materials, but we need you to explain that. We need you to help us understand your thought process for justifying these practice costs and why some practices that might be more expensive are really needed to successfully implement your project in your area. Basically, we want to know why you're proposing the number of BMPs for the total amount you're asking for, and really break it down. So, for example, if you're proposing 5 stream exclusion projects for $250,000 of 319H funding, and it comes out to $50,000 per BMP, I could compare that to another project or applicant that's proposing $60,000 for similar BMPs. And obviously there's a lot of factors that play into the costs, and we just need you to give us an idea of how it's calculated and how you chose the costing in your budget. So also help us understand how your grant and other funding sources will be used effectively and efficiently. So for example, if you know a significant amount of personnel time is needed to work with homeowners in your, for say, septic projects, then this is an effective use of your funding. That makes sense. But be sure it's clear where match and other funding is coming from to help support these activities. Also, what other resources do you have from other sources like non-federal match to help ensure the project is efficient and successful? So real quick, I want to do another poll to see how you guys are doing. If I've put you to sleep yet about all this budget stuff. I want to know more about, do you think you'll be applying to requests for any of the special budget allowances? So you can tell us yes or no, or not sure. Getting responses here. I'll give it another couple seconds. We already have an overwhelming majority of responses. I'll close it, and those are not sure. So again, it gets easier the more you dive into it, and then, as I've said multiple times, contact us if you have any questions along the way, especially about exceptions. So let's move on to project capacity for this next tab. You'll be considering or explaining things related to partnerships and technical leads, your organizational capacity. So regarding partnerships and technical leads, let me zoom in. Be sure you're clear on each of your partners' roles and how they're contributing to the project. So question 42 really keys into this about what each partner will be doing. And then explain how they have the appropriate technical expertise for the BMP implementation. So for example, they're experts in design or construction, oversight, inspections, and so on. Question 42A, how will you coordinate partners to complete the work? And 43 is how will you ensure appropriate technical expertise is involved. That helps key into explaining everyone's roles. So, and then scrolling down here is organizational capacity. So be sure you're clear on your organization's capacity and the processes you have to lead and administer a successful implementation project. Okay. Next, we will move to timeline, which is short but very important. So this is where you provide a rationale for your project timeline, also the sequence of your project activities in relation to the requested grant period. And remember, the maximum time is 3 years. Be sure to explain the rationale for why the activities will take place when they do. And remember, time of year can affect what can be done, so help us understand the rationale. For example, if you say you have all the BMPs under contract in 6 months, is that realistic? Probably not. But if that is your timeline, tell us why it is realistic. We want to know your assumptions for these decisions, and don't try and impress us with being speedy and providing unrealistic timelines. We just need you to be able to defend your decisions. So additionally, as mentioned, there are IPs that are currently in progress and awaiting EPA approval, and as just discussed earlier, that approval is needed by December 1st of this year, but based on the current status of EPA review, we recommend you defer to next year if those are your areas of interest. And if that's the case, just work with the regional coordinator, and they can help you determine if you need to defer or what's going on. They can keep you updated on the approval process. So again, for knowing if your area is eligible, make sure you refer to Table 1 about the status. So let's get to another poll. Now that I've gotten through these tabs, launch it here. So now what do you think? Do you think you'll submit for this RFA cycle? Hopefully yes, but understand if it's maybe or not sure. So kind of digesting this. Maybe you know for sure you aren't, but you're gaining information for the future, or you could be from DEQ. Okay, we have most people that have responded. I'll close it here. I'll share the results. So awesome. We have almost 20%, but yes, you're going to apply, yay. And then we have plenty of people, almost half, that are maybe still not sure. That's great. I mean, we're hopeful that you will gain more information and apply for this funding. And as I've repeatedly said, let us know of any questions along the way. We do have our questions period that is open until August 9th. So let me share my screen again. That's the PowerPoint. So we're done. Remember, this webinar is recorded, and a link will be sent to everyone who is registered, and you can share that with others. I hope to get that out in a week, some point next week. So we'll post the video, the recording, and the presentation, this PowerPoint with notes on our Nonpoint Source website. And also we'll post it to EVA. So contact us with any questions. You can contact the NPS Grants email address here, and also your regional coordinators. And again, any questions that you formally want to submit are due by August 9th. And then your final application submission is due August 30th. So now I will open it up to any questions we might have.
So we've got a question about the application, the narrative on the Excel form. Are there any word or character limits for answering the questions on the project overview and project methods tab? I'll let you answer that one, Melissa, because I'm not sure.
I don't think so. It's a basic spreadsheet, but again, we want people to be concise, focused on the meat, because sometimes if you give a really lengthy response, it can be hard to parse out, okay, what is the focus here? So we encourage thorough responses, but still concise and focused so we can understand what you're saying. But to answer the exact question, there isn't a character limit that we programmed into the response cells.
All right. That's the only question I have. I guess if you have one and it's easier just to ask it, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. I know we covered a lot of material, probably still digesting a lot of it. But yeah, feel free to raise your hand if you got a question. Just double checking. Yeah, I don't see anything else coming through. Okay, folks, just saying thank you. Yeah, we appreciate everybody's time. So like Melissa said, if you do have questions after this, feel free to contact the NPS Grants email or reach out to your regional coordinator.
Yeah, really thank you, everyone. We hope to hear from you. Hope you apply. Let us know if you have any questions. Hope you have a good rest of your day. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.